France 24's Doug Herbert joins me on the set to talk a bit more about all of this. And Doug, the Republicans, they're painting a very bleak picture of what America will be like if Joe Biden is elected. Now, the convention, just to remind everyone, started just after there was another unarmed black man who was shot in the back by a white police officer. How do events like that one fit into this Republican narrative that we heard last night?
Both parties can look at these events and really interpret them and take away from them what they will. Look, right now, this is once again at the epicenter, this shooting of the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been sweeping and really roiling all of the United States over the summer, really since George Floyd's fatal pinning by a police officer last spring. What we're seeing here is radically different responses to why these protests are happening and what should be done. The police are very staunchly defended by Trump and his allies and Republicans in general, in sweeping brushstrokes. Trump pushes back very hard, when against the Black Lives Matter movement. He defends the police. He and his Vice President, Mike Pence. Trump saying that the police face unfair criticism. Mike Pence saying that that we will always stand, meaning we, the Republicans, with the men and women serving on the thin blue line of law enforcement. Blue referring to the police. So really their sympathies lying with the police and playing into the Republican narrative at this convention of law and order. A message that, as we just heard in that report, if you elect Joe Biden, these Black Lives Matter protesters, these black people are coming, rioting to a backyard in a suburb near you, perhaps your own suburb, very soon. That there will be violence and rioting and racial strife across America, and it threatens you. The sub-narrative being is that most of these protesters are black. They are minorities in America. There is a fear element here, and there's a very not so thinly veiled threat that these are minorities, black people coming to get you in your gated communities, in your white suburbs. It sounds harsh, but that is the implicit message there. Joe Biden reacted by basically siding with the protesters, saying that he wants a full, immediate, transparent investigation, and he thinks that the officers involved should be held accountable. Now, let's note, obviously an investigation is underway. Obviously, all the facts have not been established yet. Obviously, there are a lot of raw emotions on either side, but you can see how each of these parties, this can play into their own narratives in very different ways.
Another completely different issue that's underscoring this deep divide in the U.S. is the current Middle East tour of the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Now, he'll be making his address to the RNC tonight, pre-taped from Jerusalem.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're saying, well, what does Mike Pompeo's Mideast tour have to do with what's going on in Wisconsin? Well, the only thing they really have in common is, once again, it's an instance of how differently different narratives can be interpreted and different incidents can be interpreted by two different parties. Mike Pompeo is a serving Secretary of State. He is, as you said, on a Mideast tour, which is taking in Israel, which is taken in the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan, where the U.S. is in the process of, according to Pompeo, trying to support their fragile transition to democracy after the ouster of their autocratic leader last year, Omar Bashir, and also trying to support budding Sudanese-Israel ties. He took the first flight from Tel Aviv to Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. So hailing that, so trying to show American engagement, trying to show sort of like allies, America being a staunch ally of Israel, also trying to promote friendship between Israel and other countries in the region. But let's put that aside. There's the diplomacy aspect of this visit. He has made pre-recorded remarks from Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem is where Donald Trump very controversially decided to recognize it as Israel's undivided capital, something that was supposed to be left to final negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. He moved it from Tel Aviv, moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is an extreme flashpoint in the entire Mideast debate and future negotiations as well. Mike Pompeo has recorded remarks from Jerusalem to be played at tonight's Republican National Convention. So what's the big deal about that? Secretary of State, he supports Donald Trump. Why shouldn't he be able to do that? Well, he can. There's nothing unlawful about it. The problem is it is unprecedented, and a lot of people say unethical. Why? Because it does something that's supposed to be a big taboo when you're Secretary of State, and that is mixing diplomacy, international diplomacy, and partisan politics. And you don't get too much more partisan than making a speech and campaigning on behalf of the president and speaking directly to his supporters at a party national convention. That's what's going to be happening later. Now, In his defense, State Department says he will be doing it on his own time, not using State Department resources. They are completely separate events. You should put it in its own little compartment. The problem is he himself, it's being reported by U.S. media, sent out a cable in July basically ordering his own State Department operatives not to mix. Presidential appointees should not mix diplomacy and their jobs in the State Department with presidential politics or campaigning for partisan purposes for any political party. He's doing what he in his own cable said you shall not do.
Doug, thank you for that. France 24's Doug Herbert.